and welcome back to Just Another Stitch. For those that don't know me, my name is Connie, and if you're new to my channel, I'd like to welcome you. So today we're going to be working on week 2 of my knit along, the knitted striped beanie. So some of y'all may just be discovering this video for week 2, and if you want to join in on this knit along, feel free to do so. I would love to have you. There's plenty of time to play catch up, and I will have the playlist for my knit along videos in the description box of this video, so you will be able to find the video in that playlist for week 1. I'm also curious, how is everyone coming along with their beanies? Let me know that in the comment. I'd love to hear how everything's going for y'all. And is this your first time knitting a beanie? Let me know that too. Okay, so there are a few things that I want to mention before we get started with the knitting that I didn't mention in week 1's video, but these are some very helpful things that may help you on your knitting journey. When you're doing your brim, for instance, on this tutorial, we did a knit 2 purl 2 ribbing, and sometimes it can get confusing where you might get off with your count. You accidentally do a purl stitch where it should be a knit stitch or vice versa, and this can help keep you on track of where you need to do your purls and knit stitches. You can also use stitch markers where when you go to knit your first row, you add some extra stitch markers, and you may want to do it every 4 stitches. That way you know that that's where you just finished the repeat of the knit 2 purl 2. Or you might want to just do every 8 stitches, where you should have 2 sets of knit 2 purl 2s. So that is something that you can do. Now, one thing, if you do that, make sure you can recognize your beginning of round stitch marker. Like, I would advise, like, if you have this type of stitch marker, use one color for the beginning of round, and then use another color for the other places that you put your stitch markers. But make sure you know what your beginning of round stitch marker is. And another thing too, sometimes patterns will have you, they'll say 1 inch for the brim. Now, I know I'm further up on the hat, but whenever you're measuring, you always want to put your tape measure underneath the needle. But since I'm further up, I'm going to place it where the brim ended right here and measure. And my brim is approximately 1.5 inches. But sometimes patterns will give you a measurement to go by. Same thing with the body. Sometimes you'll see it written where they'll say, you know, knit until your hat measures like 7 inches, or they'll tell you to do stockinette stitch for the body until your hat measures 7 inches. Sometimes they won't tell you do knit stitches, they'll just say stockinette. But when they say stockinette, that means if you're working in the round, that's just knit stitches. Alright, so we're gonna get started. Okay, as y'all recall, last week we did our 4 rows using the blue yarn or your color of choice. And now you want to take that blue yarn and cut the yarn, which I already cut the yarn, and you want to leave a long enough strand so that you can weave in your ends. So now you're going to slip your stitch marker, and you want to go in like you normally would a knit stitch, just like that. But don't continue your knit stitch yet. You want to take your purple yarn and wrap it around, and make sure to leave a long enough tail to weave in your ends. And you see that's how it should be wrapped around. And now we're going to continue with the knit stitch. Now you want to turn it over and take your 2 end pieces and give it a yank, and you want to twist them around. And this just helps to kind of keep the yarn in place better when you're working, because your first couple of stitches are going to be loose. So now we do the next knit stitch. You see right now, give it another tug. And now we're going to continue doing our knit stitches all the way around. And we're going to meet back up right before the stitch marker. Okay, we have just finished that round. And at this point, you want to slip your stitch marker. And you, of course, you want to give a good tug. You want to make sure everything's nice and tight. Okay. And this is where, as y'all recall when we were working the blue one, the first stitch of the second row is done a little differently. Because when you do color changes, you're working in a sphere. So you're not doing perfect even rows, and you have to adjust for it. So you want that jogless seam. So what we're going to do is you go into that first stitch purlwise and slip the stitch. So we're going to do this the first stitch of the second row after every time we change colors. And the technique I showed works best if it's 3 or more rows. There's usually a different technique if I do 1 or 2 rows, but we're not going to get into that other technique in this tutorial. But anyway, oh, and another thing too, say you want to do a beanie that's just all one color solid, you just do a knit stitch. You don't have to worry about this technique. All right, so now we're going to go into the next stitch and start back with our knitting. And again, give a good tug on the end strands. Make sure your stitching's really nice and tight there, because you'll get ladders. Okay, and just keep on stitching, and we'll meet back up at the end of the round. Okay, we just finished round 16 of the beanie, and now we're going to slip our stitch marker, and we're going to just start back with our knit stitches, and again give it a pull. Where's my end pieces? They're hiding from me. Here they are. Okay. Let me give another pull. All right, and just keep doing your knit stitches, and we'll meet back up right before the stitch worker. Okay, we just finished round 17. And one thing I do want to mention, when you're working in the round and knitting, it's called rounds, but sometimes I will call it a row by accident. All right, so you want to slip your stitch marker, and let's start back with our knit stitches. And we're going to meet back up when we get to the end of the round. Okay, we just finished row 18, which is the 4th row in the color purple. And this point forward, everything's going to be very repetitious for the body of the hat. Now things will start to change when we get into the decreases. Now, for those of y'all that are more experienced knitters, basically from this point forward, we're going to be doing 4 rows of blue, 4 rows of purple. And we're going to just keep repeating that to your desired length. On today's video, we're going to go through row 28. So we're going to be stopping at row 28 for this week. So some of y'all may feel like y'all can just continue on without having to view the other rows. Because like I said, some of you are more experienced at knitting. But for those that are beginners, I'm going to be doing, you know, row by row to make sure that y'all have everything that y'all need to know. And to help y'all get more practice in and seeing it over and over again. But yeah, so at this point, you want to cut your purple yarn. Oh, and one other thing that I do want to mention, when it comes to getting to your desired length, you want to end with 4 rows of the same color. You might not necessarily end on blue, it might be the purple, you know, or vice versa. Okay. One thing too that I want to mention, how I was talking about earlier about to your desired sizing, we're going to work our beanie to about 7 inches before we start the decreases. That's typically the average length that you typically see beanies worked. Now sometimes people have a larger or smaller head, and you may have to adjust for that. Normally what I do is I kind of try the hat on to see how it fits my head before I start working on the decreases. And also tension can affect things too. But for this tutorial, I'm going to go to about 7 inches for the body, you know, with the brim and the body. I'll measure about 7 inches. All right, so let's get back to knitting. Slip that stitch marker. Okay, you want to go in like you're starting your knit stitch, but don't finish it. You take your blue yarn, wrap it around your needle, and remember you want a long enough tail to weave in, and it's just wrapped around like this. Okay, and then finish that knit stitch. Now you want to give it a good pull. Where's my end pieces? The end pieces kind of get in your way. Okay. And you just want to kind of twist them together. And that's another thing too, since you're dealing with a lot of end pieces, make sure you don't grab the wrong strand of yarn, because you may end up accidentally knitting with the end pieces instead of the piece of yarn connected to the skein of yarn. Alright, so we continue with our knit stitches, and again give a good pull on those end pieces and just keep on knitting, and we'll meet back up before the stitch marker. Okay, we just finished round 19, and you want to take those end pieces and give them a good tug. And I'm gonna retwist mine came undone on me, and that does happen sometimes. So sometimes you will have to retwist them. Okay. So we're going to slip that stitch marker. And remember, we're now on the second round of the new color. So we want to take that first stitch of the round and go in purlwise. And we're going to slip that stitch and give it another good tug. And now we're going to just go about our way with our knit stitches and just keep knitting all the way until you reach that stitch marker. Okay, you just finished round 20, so you want to slip your stitch marker and give those end pieces a good tug and start working your knit stitches. Like I said, I usually tug after the first and second stitch of each row when I do whenever I change colors. Okay. So just continue on with your knit stitches, and we'll meet back up at the stitch marker. Okay, we just finished round 21. And one thing I do want to point out now that we have more color changes going on, you see how the rounds, if you notice, it's the color work looks even, and that's what you want. And that's why you do that special technique that I showed you. Because if you don't do that, your rounds will be all kinds of crooked. Alright, so let's get started on the final round in the blue for this section. So let's slip our slip stitch, and we're going to just do all our knit stitches. And I'm going to give it a pull, those end pieces. And just keep doing knit stitches, and we'll meet back up right before the stitch marker. Okay, we have now finished round 22, and it's time to change colors again, since we have our 4 rounds in blue. Like I said, it gets very repetitious. Alright, so we want to slip our stitch marker. Okay, you want to start your knit stitch like that. Grab your purple yarn, wrap it around your needle, and you want to finish that knit stitch. Now you want to turn your work over and find your 2 end pieces. Give a good tug. And let's twist our end pieces. Okay. And now let's do our next knit stitch. Take your end pieces, give them a good tugging. And just keep on doing your knit stitches. And we'll meet back up right before the stitch marker. Okay. We have now finished round 23, and you want to slip your stitch marker, give your end pieces a good pull, and remember this is the second round, so that first stitch we're going to go in purlwise and slip that stitch. Okay, and again give a pull, okay, and now you're just going to continue doing your knit stitches. And we'll meet back up right before the stitch marker. Okay, you have just completed round 24. So we're gonna slip our stitch marker, and then we're gonna work on knitting our stitches again. And remember, give a tug those first couple of stitches. Like I said, if you feel looseness, just give a tug. And just keep doing your knit stitches. And we'll meet back up right before the stitch marker. Okay, we have now finished round 25. So we're going to be starting round 26. So slip your stitch marker. And we're going to start knitting our stitches. I'm going to give another pull just to be on the safe side. I'd rather pull more than needed than not enough. Alright, so just continue your knit stitches and we'll meet back up at the stitch marker. Okay, we just finished round 26. And one thing I do want to mention too, when it comes to this, where the rounds meet, it is still going to have some looseness to it, and that's going to get fixed when we weave in the end. So that will be, you know, fixed. Okay, so cut your purple yarn. Since we have our 4 rows of purple now. And now we're going back to our blue yarn. And let me find my end piece. Okay. So, slip your stitch marker. Go in. Start, basically do the beginning part of your knit stitch. Take your blue yarn. Wrap it around the right needle. Leave a long enough tail for weaving in, and then complete that knit stitch. And one thing too, you can also weave in your ends as you go along. I'm going to be doing it at the end. And if you don't really know how to weave in ends with knitting, like I said, I'm going to be showing you. Alright, so we're twisting the end pieces. Give those end pieces a good tug. And continue on with your knit stitches. And make sure to give those first couple of stitches a good tug. And just continue on with your knit stitches. and we'll meet back up at the stitch marker. Okay, we just finished round 27. So we're gonna slip that stitch marker. All right, and remember, give a tug on your end pieces. And remember, this is the first stitch of the second row. So we got to do our little special technique. Go in purlwise like this and just slip that stitch. And again, give a tug and continue with your knit stitches. And I'm tugging again on that second stitch. Alright, just continue doing knit stitches and we'll meet back up right before the stitch marker. Okay, we have now finished round 28 and this will be our stopping point for week 2. Now, do not cut your blue yarn because next week we will be continuing in the same color yarn. Okay. So, one thing I always advise, put your end caps on your work and pull your stitches away from the tips of your needles when you put them down. You do not want to get any drop stitches on your beautiful work. And yeah, look at how it's coming along. We are probably around the halfway mark right now. And I would love to see pictures of the progress on your beanies. If y'all want to send me a picture, my email address is justanotherstitch2020@gmail.com, and it is listed in the description box of this video. And I'm going to be uploading weeks 3 video either sometime Thursday evening or sometime Friday. So yeah, I hope y'all are enjoying this stitch along / tutorial. Well, actually, I'm sorry, knit along / tutorial. But yeah, if y'all have any questions or anything, feel free to reach me. And I hope y'all are all having a fabulous yarny day. Be the light, and bye.